The daughter of a millionaire is saved by a poor boy from a fire in the Altadena area of California. But after bringing her to safety, the boy doesn't ask for money or the rewards the millionaire assumed everyone wanted from him. Instead, his request leaves the millionaire stunned, something he had never heard anyone say, and something he had never even considered in his entire life. Laughter echoed through the room, mingling with the delicate clink of champagne glasses. The dazzling crystal chandelier illuminated every corner of the grand mansion. A group of guests stood by the marble fireplace, trading stories of success, stocks, and lavish vacations like delicate fans weaving through the air. Yet above it all, an eerie silence lingered, unnoticed by anyone. Ethan Miller stood on the second-floor balcony, his cold gaze sweeping over the scene below. His tailored suit fit his tall frame perfectly, but his face betrayed no emotion. All of this, the lights, the laughter, the congratulations, had become nothing more than a familiar cycle, one he was weary of. His eyes stopped in the corner of the room. Sophia, his 8-year-old daughter, sat quietly on a large armchair, her small hands clutching a porcelain doll. Her soft blue silk dress shimmered under the light, but her expression seemed strangely out of place in the lively atmosphere. Her large, dark eyes observed the crowd but did not engage. Ethan leaned against the railing, gripping a wine glass tightly, the coldness of the glass seeping into his fingers. He knew what she felt because he felt it too, a gnawing emptiness that even wealth could not fill. "Remarkable, Ethan?" A voice cut through his thoughts, jolting him back. Nathan, a longtime business partner, approached with a self-satisfied grin. "This mansion is truly a masterpiece. You really know how to live." Ethan turned, nodding vaguely. "Thank you, Nathan. I'm just trying to make the most of what I have." His words drifted away like a shadow, devoid of any real sentiment. Below, the laughter grew louder, as if everyone were trying to mask an invisible void. Sophia remained still, her fingers gently stroking the doll's hair. Ethan watched her a moment longer, a pang of unease stirring within him, inexplicable yet undeniable. Outside, the air felt different. A dry wind swept through, carrying a faint scent of smoke. A few guests murmured, but no one truly paid attention. A server emerged from the kitchen holding a tray, his eyes darting nervously, as though hiding something. "Do you smell that?" A woman in a black dress whispered to her companion. "I think there's smoke." "Probably just the fireplace," the other replied, her gaze drifting lazily toward the window, where the distant hills glimmered faintly in the dark. But Ethan heard it, not just the smell of smoke but the hurried footsteps, the kitchen door opening and slamming shut. He descended the stairs, tension in the air strung tight like a bowstring. Then it came. A scream. Sharp, clear, and slicing through the festive hum. "Fire! The flames are outside, spreading into the kitchen." Heads turned, eyes widened, and the atmosphere plunged into chaos. Ethan rushed toward the kitchen, but smoke was already pouring out from the doorway, thick and black. The smell of burning was unmistakable, no longer from the fireplace but from something raging uncontrollably inside. He stood there, fists clenched, chest tightening. One thought burned through his mind. Sophia. Black smoke billowed out of the kitchen like a ravenous beast, swallowing the air inside the mansion. Small sparks rained down from the ceiling, and the light from the crystal chandelier reflected in fiery red streaks on the walls. Screams echoed from every corner, not the soft murmurs of a lively party, but the desperate chaos of survival. "Run! The fire's coming!" a man yelled, stumbling toward the front door. His wine glass shattered underfoot, mingling with shards from the fallen chandelier. Frantic footsteps collided, guests shoved past one another, desperately seeking escape through hallways that grew narrower with the thickening smoke. Amid the panic, Ethan charged down the staircase, his breath ragged from the choking air. "Sophia! Sophia, where are you?" he shouted, his voice hoarse and barely audible over the roar of the flames. Smoke stung his eyes, but he didn't stop. His gaze swept frantically across the crowd, but there was no sign of Sophia. Bursting through the mansion gates now engulfed in fire, Logan coughed as the first waves of smoke filled his lungs. "Is anyone in there?" he shouted, but his voice was nearly drowned out by the roar of the fire and distant cries. His small feet halted as his eyes scanned the darkened windows. Inside the living room, the scene made him freeze. Glass shards from the chandelier blanketed the floor, and thick black smoke obscured everything. But there, under a large table, he spotted a small figure curled up. Sophia? He didn't know her name, but he had seen her before, sitting alone on the balcony of this house, clutching her porcelain doll with a melancholy look. It had to be her. There was no mistaking that trembling figure. Bending low, Logan peered closer through the hazy smoke. "Hey, don't be scared. I'll get you out." The little girl didn't respond, her wide eyes staring up at him, her lips pressed tight in fear. Logan reached through the broken wood and debris. "Take my hand," he said, his voice firm but gentle. Sophia hesitated, but Logan's earnest gaze compelled her to move. Her small hand reached for his. Logan crouched down, his hand shaking as he lifted Sophia off the ground. The intense heat clawed at him, the flames roared around them, licking dangerously close to his skin. Every step felt like walking through hell. Burning pieces of the ceiling crashed inches behind them, the thunderous boom, urging him to move faster. He shielded Sophia from flying embers, his breath caught in his chest from the suffocating smoke. "It's okay. I'll get you out," he whispered, his voice raw. But his determined eyes seemed to remind himself, "Don't stop, don't fail." A loud crack sounded behind them as a large beam collapsed, blocking the path they'd just crossed. Logan gritted his teeth, holding Sophia tighter, and pushed forward, leaving fear behind as if it no longer existed. Outside, Ethan collapsed onto the lawn, his body numb. Smoke filled his lungs, and he wasn't sure if he could stand again. His tear-filled eyes locked onto the burning mansion, his lips trembling as he murmured over and over, "Sophia?" Then he saw it. A small figure emerged from the flames, walking steadily. Logan stepped out of the black smoke, his clothes singed, his cheeks streaked with soot, but in his arms was Sophia. She was trembling but alive. Logan stepped heavily onto the grass, his scorched shoes leaving ashen marks on the ground. Each breath was an effort, as if the air had turned thick and oppressive with the stench of smoke and fire. He held Sophia tightly in his arms, feeling her small, trembling body but keeping his head high and his gaze steady. Ethan rushed forward, his eyes bloodshot from the smoke and tears. He dropped to his knees in front of Logan, his trembling hands reaching out to take Sophia. The little girl clung to her father's neck, her small face pressed against his shoulder, silent tears streaming down her cheeks. "I'm sorry, Sophia," he said, his voice breaking. His hand shook as he pulled her close, as if afraid she might disappear. "I was wrong. I wasn't there when you needed me. I left you alone. I promise I'll change. I'll be the father you deserve," Ethan said, his voice cracking with each word. Sophia said nothing, only rested her head on his shoulder, a tiny sob escaping her, but it was enough to tear him apart. Logan stood there, his small, thin shoulders rising and falling with each breath, but his eyes remained fixed on the reunion before him. Without a word, he turned and started walking toward the garden to avoid interrupting their moment. But Ethan wouldn't let him leave. "Wait," Ethan called, his voice hoarse but filled with sincerity. He stood up, holding Sophia in his arms, his eyes searching for Logan. Thank you for saving her, for doing what I should have done." Logan turned back, his face still smeared with ash and soot, but his gaze burned brightly, like a flame that refused to die. "I did what needed to be done," he replied simply, his voice quiet yet firm. Ethan didn't know what to say. Ordinary words of gratitude felt inadequate to express the tidal wave of emotion surging through him. He stepped closer to Logan, placing a hand on the boy's shoulder. "You're a hero, kid," he said, for the first time, his voice carrying a weight it never had before. Logan lowered his head, saying nothing. In his eyes, there was no pride or arrogance, only weariness and a hint of relief. "I just didn't want to see anyone get hurt," he said, as straightforward as the way he'd walked into the flames to save the girl. Ethan glanced around, the fiery glow still painting the sky behind them. Sparks flickered in the night, like fallen stars from heaven. Though the flames had consumed the mansion, he realized something strange. He didn't care. Not one bit. The wealth, the priceless artifacts, the antique paintings in the living room, all of it paled in comparison to Sophia's safety. He turned back to Logan, a boy who likely had never known the kind of luxury Ethan had once considered the centerpiece of his life. Yet it was this boy, without a second thought, who had stepped into danger to save what mattered most to him. "How did you do it?" Ethan asked, his voice filled with genuine wonder rather than idle curiosity. "Weren't you afraid?" Logan shrugged, his gaze drifting away from Ethan and toward the smoky sky. "Of course I was," he admitted. "But sometimes, doing nothing is scarier." The answer left Ethan stunned. He realized he had never thought of it that way. He, with all his power and wealth, had spent most of his life avoiding risks he didn't have to face. But a boy, with nothing but courage, had just taught him a lesson no elite school could ever provide. Sophia, now calm, looked up at Logan. "Thank you," she said softly, her big eyes speaking volumes. Logan nodded, a faint smile crossing his soot-streaked face. "It's nothing," he replied, turning to leave, his hand unconsciously adjusting his singed shirt. Ethan watched him walk away, his heart swelling with an unfamiliar feeling, respect, not just for another person, but for compassion, bravery, and the true meaning of life. He couldn't let the boy leave without doing something. "Logan, wait," Ethan called, this time with more resolve. Logan stopped, turning back with a curious look. Ethan stepped closer, still holding Sophia in his arms. "I owe you a debt far greater than words can express. If you need anything at all, just ask." Logan stared at him for a long moment, silence stretching between them. But instead of making a request, he simply shook his head. "I don't need anything," he said calmly. "Just keep your promise to her. Be the father she deserves." Ethan stood in the faint glow of the distant fire, feeling as if he were holding something fragile yet priceless. Sophia had fallen asleep in his arms, her steady breathing a reminder that the most important things remained intact. But his eyes were fixed on Logan, the boy standing silently, his small frail shoulders showing no sign of asking for anything. "I can't repay you for saving her like this." Ethan broke the silence, his voice cutting through the still air. He took a deep breath, striving to keep his tone steady. "You saved Sophia. You saved my whole world. I can't let you walk away like this." Logan furrowed his brow slightly but remained calm. "I don't need anything, Mr. Ethan, I'm fine." "No, you're not fine," Ethan countered, stepping closer. "Whatever you need. Money? A new home? A better future. I can make it happen. Just tell me." Logan stayed silent, as though carefully considering his words. The firelight flickered in his eyes, but there was no greed or longing in them. Instead, they reflected the composure of someone who understood the true value of life. After a moment of silence, Logan spoke, his voice slow but firm. "I don't want money. I don't need a new home. I just want one day." Ethan frowned, confused. "One day?" Logan looked up at him, his gaze sharp and sincere. "Just one day. One day where you live like me. Live the way I have to live every day. No mansion, no driver, no power. Just one day as Sophia's father, like an ordinary man." Logan's request froze Ethan in place. The idea of giving up his comfort and security to live one day in Logan's shoes was something he had never imagined. But what worried him more was whether he could even do it. Sophia stirred in his arms, her soft breathing pulling him out of his thoughts. He looked at Logan, trying to decipher the true intent behind the boy's proposal. "Are you serious?" Ethan asked, his voice hoarse. "Completely," Logan replied without hesitation. "You want to repay me, don't you? This is how." Ethan felt the challenge in Logan's words, but it wasn't disrespectful. It felt like a call to action, an opportunity to do something greater than just handing over money. He glanced back at his mansion, now a blackened shell with smoke still rising into the night sky. In that moment, he felt something strange. The loss didn't hurt as much as he thought it would. The antique paintings, the lavish furniture, the extravagant gifts meant to impress business partners, all of it seemed meaningless compared to the relief of holding Sophia in his arms. "All right," he said, his voice weary but resolute. "One day?" Logan nodded, unsurprised by Ethan's answer. "Then it starts tomorrow. You and Sophia come to my home." "My home?" Ethan repeated, unable to hide his skepticism. Logan smirked faintly, his eyes gleaming. "Where I live. There are no chandeliers, no parties, but there are other things I think you'll want to see." Ethan let out a long, heavy sigh. He wasn't sure what he was walking into, but part of him felt that this might be the chance to fill the void he had carried for so many years. As Logan turned and walked away, Ethan stood there, watching the boy's small frame disappear into the distance. Sophia, still asleep in his arms, breathed softly, a symbol of everything he held most dear. "One day," he repeated to himself, as if to reassure himself. But deep down, he knew that one day could change everything. Logan stepped into the small house, the light from the oil lamp on the table casting a warm glow over the cold night. Martha sat by the window, her skilled hands weaving yarn. As Logan closed the door, she looked up, her eyes full of love. "You're back," she said, her gentle voice tinged with concern. "Is something on your mind, Logan? You look thoughtful." Logan walked over and sat across from her, his hands clasped together as if searching for the right words. "Today, I met a man. His name is Ethan, and his daughter Sophia," he said slowly. "They've been through something terrible. Their house burned down, and he nearly lost Sophia. Martha's hands paused, her eyes intent. Oh my goodness. Those poor souls. Are they all right? Logan nodded, though worry lingered on his face. They're okay, but I could see the weight he's carrying. He feels guilty about Sophia, and she's so shy and withdrawn. I think, maybe they need a place like this. Martha tilted her head, her expression softening. What are you thinking, Logan? Logan exhaled, his eyes filled with determination. I want to invite them here tomorrow. I want them to see that you don't need a lot of luxury to live. Here, we have love and care for one another, and I think Sophia needs that. Martha sat quietly for a moment, her eyes thoughtful yet full of empathy. Finally, she placed her hand on Logan's, her voice gentle but firm. Logan, this house may not be big, but our hearts are wide enough for anyone who needs it. If you think this is good for them, I will welcome them as part of our family. Logan smiled softly, the tension within him easing. Thank you. I knew you'd understand. Martha gave his hand a reassuring squeeze, her eyes shining with pride. You always make me proud, Logan. Tomorrow, we'll get ready to welcome them. Logan stood up, a small smile still lingering on his lips. He turned back into the house, feeling lighter. Martha remained by the window, watching his silhouette fade, her heart warm with the belief that Logan was doing the right thing, and that their home would be the start of something better. The pale sunlight stretched across the cracked streets of Altadena, where small houses with peeling paint stood in rustic yet peaceful charm. Sophia, hiding behind Ethan, glanced around with a hint of nervousness. Logan's small house sat at the end of the street, its crooked roof and broken wooden fence exuding a unique vitality she'd never known. Logan waited at the gate, hands in his pockets, his relaxed demeanor starkly contrasting with Ethan and Sophia's unease. You're here, he said, glancing curiously at Sophia. You'll like it here, Sophia. The girl nodded, her large eyes darting around but staying silent. Ethan placed a gentle hand on her shoulder, giving it a reassuring squeeze. Let's go inside, he said, trying to keep his voice steady. Inside the small house, the space was simple but clean. A wooden table with mismatched chairs stood in the center of the kitchen, and a pot of soup simmered on the stove, filling the air with the comforting aroma of carrots and potatoes. Sophia quietly took a seat, her eyes stealing glances at Martha, who smiled warmly from the kitchen corner. You don't have to be so tense, sweetheart, Martha said, her voice soft but comforting. Sophia pressed her lips together, only shaking her head, clearly not ready to let down her guard. Ethan sat next to his daughter, his hands resting on the table's edge as he searched for words to break the silence. Thank you, Mrs. Martha. Really, I don't know how to express my gratitude. Martha shook her head, her hands gently smoothing the tablecloth. Just sit down and enjoy a proper meal, dear. Logan placed a bowl of soup in front of Sophia. You should try this. Mrs. Martha makes the best soup in the neighborhood. Sophia glanced up at him, her eyes hesitant but finally picking up the spoon. She took a small sip, then looked at Logan, her lips moving slightly. It's good, she whispered, her voice barely audible. As the meal went on, Logan shared a story about a time he tried to fix an old bike and ended up dropping the wheel. His clumsy hand gestures brought an unexpected giggle from Sophia. It was just a small laugh, but to Ethan, it felt like a breakthrough, tearing down the walls between him and his daughter. Laugh louder, Sophia, Logan said, his teasing eyes meeting hers. Don't hold back. Sophia looked up, her cheeks flushing, but this time she didn't shy away. She giggled again, the sound filling the small kitchen and making the atmosphere lighter than ever. Ethan watched his daughter, a mix of surprise and emotion welling up inside him. She hasn't laughed like that in years, he murmured to Martha. It just takes time and sincerity, Martha replied, her eyes glimmering with understanding. After dinner, Sophia began to explore the house curiously. She stopped in front of an old cabinet filled with small photographs, her fingers brushing lightly against the glass. Who's this? She asked, her voice soft but clearer than before. Those are Logan's parents, Martha answered, stepping closer. They've passed on, but they left behind so many memories. Sophia nodded, her eyes sparkling with sympathy. She looked up at Martha, not avoiding her gaze for the first time, and gave a small smile. That evening, as the three of them sat on the porch, Sophia rested her head on Ethan's shoulder, her eyes gazing at the horizon painted gold by the setting sun. Dad, she said softly, her voice no longer tinged with fear. I like this place. It feels like everyone's so close. Ethan placed his hand on her shoulder, his eyes stinging slightly. He glanced at Logan, who was leaning against the fence, his eyes following the neighbors passing by. Logan smiled faintly, as if he knew he had done the right thing. As night fell, Sophia lay on the small bed, her smile lingering as she drifted into sleep. Ethan sat by the table, watching his daughter, his heart swelling with emotion. She's healing, he thought. Not because of money or extravagant things he had once tried to give her, but because of the sincerity, simplicity, and closeness he had found here. Looking back, he saw Logan still standing quietly outside, his eyes fixed on the distant stars. In that moment, Ethan realized that it wasn't just Sophia healing, it was him too. The next morning, pale golden sunlight stretched over the cracked streets of the Altadena neighborhood. Ethan opened his eyes, feeling disoriented, waking up in a small room with faded walls and the sound of birds chirping through a window without glass. Sophia lay curled up on a single bed in the corner, clutching her porcelain doll tightly. Logan stood at the door, smiling softly as he watched Ethan blinking, adjusting to the daylight. "Time to get up, Mr. Ethan. We've got a busy day ahead," he said, his eyes gleaming with a sense of responsibility. Logan led Ethan and Sophia on a walk around the neighborhood. On both sides of the street, kids played with makeshift toys. A milk carton turned into a truck, a kite pieced together from plastic bags and old string. Despite the simplicity of their creations, their laughter echoed brightly, lighting up the impoverished streets. "They make everything themselves," Logan said, pride shining in his eyes. "Nobody around here can afford store-bought toys, but the kids never stop creating." Ethan watched the children playing, a mix of awe and emotion welling up inside him. "They don't need anything except joy," he murmured, almost to himself. Standing next to him, Sophia smiled softly, her eyes sparkling with fascination. As they passed a small house, Logan stopped. An old man sat on the porch, holding a rusty saw and a long wooden plank. "I've got some work to do this morning," Logan said, stepping closer. "Good morning, Mr. Brown," Logan greeted, picking up the plank the old man had just set aside. "Need to fix the fence, don't you?" Mr. Brown looked up, a warm smile spreading across his deeply wrinkled face. "That's right, Logan. But my hands aren't what they used to be. Will you give me a hand?" Logan turned back to Ethan. "How about we do it together?" Ethan hesitated briefly. He had never handled tools in his life, but the sincerity in Logan's eyes and the trust in Mr. Brown's smile made him nod. "All right." Ethan sat beside Logan, awkwardly holding the saw. Logan patiently guided him through each step. How to hold it, how to saw evenly, how to hammer nails securely. Ethan sawed his first piece of wood slowly, his hands aching within minutes. Blisters quickly formed on his skin, a sensation he had never experienced before. Sophia sat under a nearby tree, watching her father and Logan work. She giggled occasionally at Ethan's clumsiness, but her eyes sparkled with admiration. Logan hammered the final nail into the fence and looked at Ethan. "You did great, Mr. Ethan. You really did," he said, his voice encouraging and cheerful. Ethan looked at the repaired fence, a small sense of pride swelling in his chest. He smiled. A rare, genuine smile. "This feeling, it's strange, but it's good," he admitted. The three returned to Logan's house by noon. Lunch was simple again, bread and vegetable stew. But the atmosphere in the tiny kitchen was filled with warmth. Sophia excitedly told Martha about the kids and their milk carton truck. Martha laughed heartily, gently stroking Sophia's hair. Ethan sat quietly, observing everyone around him. A sense of calm washed over him. He realized he had never felt this at ease during any of his luxurious meals. Here, there were no polite pretenses or scrutinizing glances. People were simply present, sharing each moment together. After lunch, Logan pulled Ethan outside. "There's one more place you need to see," he said, leading him to an open lot at the end of the street. Neighbors had gathered there, building a temporary shelter for a family affected by the wildfire. Ethan watched them work together, from adults to children, each contributing in their own way. No one gave orders, no one argued, everything flowed seamlessly, bound by trust. "You were right," Ethan said thoughtfully. "Here, people don't just live for themselves." Logan nodded. "You see, we don't have much here, but we always have each other." Ethan looked down at his hands, feeling the sting of his blisters. But it didn't bother him. Instead, he felt something he couldn't quite name, peace, a sense of belonging. "Kid," Ethan said, his gaze resting on Logan. "I think I'm learning how to live, thanks to you." Night fell over the Altadena neighborhood, bringing a quiet broken only by the chirping of crickets and the rustling of leaves in the breeze. Inside Logan's small house, the light from an oil lamp flickered on the walls, casting shifting shadows. Sophia was asleep on a small bed in the corner, her steady breathing creating a sense of peace. Martha sat in a chair by the window, knitting in silence. Ethan sat at the wooden table in the center of the room, his hands clasped together, eyes fixed on the floor. Logan sat across from him, silently observing. The air between them was heavy but not uncomfortable. It carried a sense of anticipation. Finally, Ethan spoke. "Logan, you've taught me so much." His voice was hoarse, as though each word required great effort. "About living for others, about appreciating what I have. But I think it's time I said something." Logan tilted his head, his gaze curious but unpressuring. "What is it you want to say?" Ethan took a deep breath, his hands tightening on the table. "I've failed. Not in work or business, but in being a father." Ethan looked up, his eyes glistening with tears. "I always thought I could use money to make up for it. A big house, expensive toys, lavish vacations. I thought that was how to show I loved her. But the truth is, I wasn't there, Logan. I was never really present. I was too busy with my career, proving myself." His voice cracked, and silent tears rolled down his cheeks. Sophia didn't need a mansion. She needed me. But I didn't realize that until I almost lost her forever in that fire. Logan looked at Ethan, his calm eyes now filled with deep empathy. "Recognizing that now is a good thing," he said gently but firmly. "Not everyone gets a second chance to make it right." At that moment, a small voice came from the corner of the room. "Dad?" Ethan started, turning around. Sophia had woken up at some point, her eyes glimmering in the dim light as she looked at him. "Did you really think I needed those things?" she asked, her voice hesitant but without blame. "Sophia." Ethan breathed, unsure of what to say. She walked over, clutching her porcelain doll, and sat down next to him. "I don't need anything but you," Sophia said softly but with certainty. "I just want you to be here. Not just someone who buys me things." Ethan looked at her, his eyes overflowing with tears. He leaned down, pulling Sophia into his arms. "I'm sorry," he whispered, his voice breaking. "I'm sorry I didn't see it sooner. But I promise, I'll change. I'll be here for you always." Sophia wrapped her arms around his neck, her cheek pressed against his shoulder. "I forgive you, as long as you keep your promise." Logan watched the scene from across the table, a faint smile crossing his face. Martha, still knitting nearby, looked up, her kind eyes reflecting satisfaction. The next morning, as the first rays of sunlight streamed through the window, Ethan and Sophia prepared to leave. Sophia lingered at the door, her eyes hesitant as she looked at Logan and Martha, reluctant to part from them. Ethan knelt down, placing a hand on her shoulder. "Sweetheart, we need to return to the temporary house my assistant arranged. We'll come back when things are more settled, remember?" Sophia turned to Martha, her eyes lighting up briefly before becoming sad again. "Grandma Martha, I don't want to leave," she said, her voice choking. "I'll miss you." Martha gently placed her hand on Sophia's head, her gaze full of love. "I understand, my dear. But I know you'll be okay. Your father has changed, and you'll have many chances to come back here. Will you still remember me?" Sophia held her hand, her eyes filled with worry. "I'll miss you so much." Martha smiled, soothing her. "Missing me is good, but you need to learn to be happy with your father. I'll always be here, and we'll see each other again soon." Ethan saw the warmth in Martha's eyes and knew Sophia needed time to adjust. "Thank you, Martha. She'll be okay," he said in a low voice. Logan stood by the door, offering a faint smile. "It'll all be fine, Mr. Ethan. Let things happen naturally." Ethan gave Sophia's hand a gentle squeeze and slowly led her outside. Sophia looked back one last time before stepping through the gate of Logan and Martha's home. As the car took them away from Altadena, Ethan felt a sense of calm in his heart, though the road ahead remained long. He looked at Sophia, holding her hand, and silently vowed never to let her feel unloved or neglected again. Deep in his heart, Ethan knew their new life, while challenging, would no longer lack precious moments or the presence of those who truly mattered. Morning at the temporary home, sunlight streamed through the small window, brightening the humble space inside. Sophia sat at the dining table, scattered with drawing paper and colored pencils. She focused intently on her artwork, her eyes sparkling with an excitement Ethan hadn't seen in a long time. Ethan sat across from her, holding a cup of coffee but unable to take his eyes off his daughter. In his heart, he felt a shift in her. The invisible scars from the distance between them seemed to be slowly healing. "What are you drawing?" Ethan asked gently. Sophia looked up and smiled. "It's Logan, Miss Martha, and you," she said, handing him the picture. Ethan studied the drawing. The simple yet lively lines depicted Logan standing in an open lot, Miss Martha smiling with a spoon in hand, and Sophia with a radiant grin. In the corner of the picture was Ethan, awkwardly holding a hammer but with determination on his face. "This is beautiful, Sophia," Ethan said, his voice filled with emotion. "I'm so proud of you." Sophia beamed, her cheeks flushing pink. "Thank you, Dad. I just want to keep happy memories." That evening, after Sophia had fallen asleep, Ethan sat quietly by the small window, his gaze fixed on the night sky. Images of Altadena, of Logan, and of children with makeshift toys and hearty laughter spun through his mind. He couldn't stop thinking about the vacant lot at the end of the neighborhood, where everyone had gathered to rebuild after the fire. Ethan took a deep breath, his hands tightening on his knees. An idea began to form, an idea he believed could change not only his life but also the lives of those around him. The next morning, Ethan and Sophia returned to Altadena. The little girl seemed excited, her small steps quick and eager along the uneven road. As they approached Logan's house, Ethan saw him helping a neighbor fix a roof. Logan looked up, squinting at Ethan and Sophia, then hopped down from the ladder, dusting off his sleeves. "Good morning, Mr. Ethan. What brings you here?" Logan asked, his voice calm but his eyes curious. Ethan smiled, a newfound determination shining in his eyes. "I have an idea, and I want you to hear it." Logan led them to the empty lot at the end of the street, the place where people had gathered after the fire. Ethan stood in the middle of the space, his eyes scanning the patches of wild grass and lingering debris. He turned to Logan and began to share his idea. "I want to turn this place into a community center," Ethan said firmly. "A place where kids can learn, play, and feel connected. I can't change the past, but I want to help this neighborhood have a brighter future." Logan looked at him, surprise evident in his eyes but without a hint of doubt. "You really think so? A community center?" "I'm certain," Ethan replied. "What I've seen here, the unity, the bravery, the love, it's something worth preserving, and I need your help to make it happen." Logan was silent for a moment, weighing Ethan's words. Finally, he nodded, a faint smile crossing his face. "If you're serious, I'll help. This isn't just your idea, it's what this neighborhood needs." In the days that followed, Ethan began reaching out to old contacts to gather donations of materials, books, and supplies. Logan and the residents of the neighborhood joined in enthusiastically, each contributing in their own way. Ethan wasn't just an observer. He hammered nails, painted walls, and built bookshelves alongside Logan. The blisters on his hands had hardened into calluses, but instead of pain, he felt pride. Sophia joined in too, using her crayons to paint murals on the walls. "This is Logan," she said, pointing to a drawing of him standing among smiling children. When the community center was completed, Altadena lit up with renewed hope. The walls were adorned with children's artwork, the shelves filled with donated books, and a small playground behind the center became a gathering place for the entire neighborhood. At the grand opening, Ethan stepped onto the stage, his hands trembling slightly as he held the microphone. "This center is not just a building," he said, his voice steady yet emotional. "It's a symbol of hope, love, and what we can achieve when we come together." Logan stood nearby, nodding subtly, a kind smile on his face. That night, after everyone had left, Ethan sat on the steps of the center, gazing at the starry sky. Sophia leaned against his shoulder and softly said, "Dad, I'm proud of you." Ethan wrapped his arms around his daughter, his heart filled with peace. "I'm proud of you too, Sophia, and of everything we've done together." Logan stood nearby, hands in his pockets, his eyes fixed on the sky. "Now you understand the true meaning of building, don't you, Mr. Ethan?" Ethan smiled. "I do, Logan. Thank you for helping me see it." The night sky shimmered, casting a gentle glow over the community center, a symbol of a new beginning, not just for Sophia and Ethan but for the entire neighborhood of Altadena. The inauguration day of the Altadena Community Center unfolded under radiant sunlight, bringing warmth to everyone. Colorful ribbons adorned the freshly painted building, brightening the entire neighborhood. Outside, the air buzzed with joy, laughter, and heartfelt conversations, weaving together a symphony of unity. Children darted around, their eyes sparkling as they admired vibrant murals in the small playground adjacent to the building. Ethan, Logan, and Sophia stood in front of the center, Ethan's gaze sweeping over the crowd. He didn't just see a grand opening, he felt the weight of the journey that had led to this moment. Holding his daughter's hand, he experienced a connection he had never known before. This wasn't just a ribbon-cutting ceremony, it was a new beginning for a community, for a family. A family built on love and the willingness to make a difference. Martha stepped onto the wooden podium, holding a microphone. Her voice rang out, gentle yet deeply moving. Today, we're not just opening a building. We're opening a door to the future. This is where our children will learn, play, and grow. And none of this would have been possible without the love and dedication of our community. The crowd erupted into applause, some moved to tears. Martha turned to Ethan and Logan, her eyes brimming with pride. And a special thank you to Ethan. You didn't just bring resources. You brought your heart to this project. Thank you, Logan, for your courage and your boundless spirit that has inspired us all. After the speech, Logan led the children inside the center. Exclamations of awe filled the air as they discovered shelves brimming with books, a colorful room adorned with murals they had painted, and a small corner with old computers and study desks where they could learn or work on group projects. Sophia clutched Logan's hand, her smile lighting up as she spotted the wall featuring her artwork. Look, Logan, that's my painting. Ethan stood by the door, watching his daughter blend into the group of children. He felt a deep sense of joy welling up inside, not the fleeting satisfaction of material accomplishments he once pursued, but the profound fulfillment of creating something truly meaningful. This center wasn't just a building, it was a symbol of the transformative changes he and people like Logan had brought to life. After the ceremony, Ethan sat on the front steps of the center, watching families chat and laugh together. The scene felt like a dream where ordinary moments became precious. He turned to Logan, who stood quietly nearby, his eyes following the children playing ball in the yard. Logan, Ethan said, breaking the silence. You've changed my life. You didn't just show me the value of helping others. You helped me see myself and my daughter. I've realized that what I've been searching for all along wasn't material success but love and genuine connections with the people around me. Logan smiled faintly, his eyes glinting with quiet satisfaction. You changed yourself, Mr. Ethan? I just gave you the opportunity to see it. Ethan nodded, his heart swelling with gratitude. I'll never forget this. And I'll keep doing good, not just here but wherever I'm needed. As night fell, the laughter slowly subsided, replaced by the serene stillness of a fulfilled day. Ethan, Sophia, and Logan sat together on a wooden bench outside the center. The starry sky stretched above them, a shimmering velvet canvas. No one spoke for a while, but the silence wasn't awkward. It was the quiet of contentment, of a peace that came from deep within. Sophia rested her head on her father's shoulder, her voice soft, almost a whisper to herself. I think this is the best day of my life, Dad. Ethan looked at his daughter, his heart brimming with gratitude and serenity. He placed a hand on her head, speaking gently. I think so too, Sophia. I'm so proud of you. Logan watched them, a brief smile crossing his youthful yet mature face. He said nothing, his gaze fixed on the sky, where the stars mirrored the essence of life and renewal. He felt a quiet joy knowing he had been part of this story. The final image lingered on the community center, its porch lights casting a gentle glow. In the backdrop of the wildfire's remnants, it stood as a beacon of hope and resilience. The sounds of laughter, conversation, and the vibrancy of Altadena now marked the beginning of a new legacy, one built on unity and growth. With Logan, Sophia, and Ethan sitting together, the story closed in a sense of fulfillment, leaving behind a profound message. Love and connection can overcome any adversity, creating miracles in their wake. If this film touches your heart, leave your mark with a like, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel to explore more meaningful stories with us. Share your feelings with us and tell us your own stories. Every word you share is a building block that helps create our strong and enduring community. Together, we'll create a warm space where everyone can share and connect. Finally, don't miss the incredible stories coming your way soon. We're always here to bring you the best selections, full of deep values yet entertaining. See you there. A sharp sound pierced through the chaos, the unmistakable crash of something familiar. Ethan's eyes locked onto it instantly. In the corner of the room lay Sophia's porcelain doll, its head shattered into fragments scattered across the floor. His breath caught, as if the air had been stolen from his lungs. Sophia, he screamed, his voice tearing through his throat, but only silence answered. Silence, cold and cutting like a blade sinking into his heart. The mansion was no longer the grand estate he once took pride in but a deadly trap. Ethan shoved burning debris out of his path, struggling to steady himself as the temperature climbed. The thought of Sophia still trapped in one of the rooms tightened like a vice around his chest. Not far away, at the edge of the woods, Logan Carter, a 14-year-old boy, stared at the glowing red light of the spreading flames. His house was just a few streets away, and the festive sounds from earlier had been replaced by screams and shattering glass. Biting his lip, his hands trembling slightly, Logan made a decision. He ran.